Command Overlord Vrax drummed his chitinous fingers against the glassy surface of the tactical display. Real-time footage from the initial deployment streamed across multiple screens, each one showing different regions of the planet designated Target 3, or as the locals called it, Earth.
Status report,
he demanded, not looking away from the central screen showing a desert landscape somewhere the intelligence briefing had called Arizona.
All insertion teams deployed according to schedule, Command Overlord,
replied Strategic Officer Kren, adjusting her ceremonial armor. The polished black exoskeleton gleamed under the ship's ambient lighting.
27 biome-specific squadrons have established forward operating bases across all major terrain types.
Vrax nodded, satisfaction rippling through his pheromone glands. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned.
Remind me again why we selected this particular mudball,
asked junior tactician Morev, a recent academy graduate on his first combat deployment. His inexperience was showing, questioning decisions that had been made by his superiors months ago. Kren shot him a warning glance, but Vrax found himself feeling indulgent. The young needed to learn, after all.
This planet represents the perfect training environment,
Vrax explained, zooming the display out to show the entire blue-green sphere.
According to our research, it contains virtually every type of challenging terrain the Dominion might encounter in its coming expansion. Frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense vegetation zones, high mountain ranges, aquatic regions both salt and fresh, volcanic activity, seasonal temperature fluctuations exceeding 100 degrees, and atmospheric conditions ranging from oxygen-rich to nearly unbreathable.
Seems excessive,
Morev observed.
Precisely,
said Vrax.
If our soldiers can master combat operations on this single world, they'll be prepared for any environment we encounter during the next 1,000 cycles of expansion. The diversity makes it ideal.
And the indigenous population?
Morev asked. Vrax dismissed the question with a wave of his upper appendage.
Minimal resistance expected. Type 7 bipedal mammals. Pre-unified planetary government. Primitive projectile and explosive weaponry. Our intelligence suggests they're still fighting each other over imaginary territorial boundaries and resource allocation.
Perfect training adversaries,
added Kren.
Capable enough to provide realistic combat experience for our troops, but not advanced enough to pose any genuine threat.
And they're confined to a narrow environmental tolerance,
Vrax continued.
They require consistent temperature ranges, specific atmospheric compositions, regular hydration, and frequent caloric intake. They can't survive more than a few days in many of their own planet's biomes without artificial assistance.
Unlike our troops,
said Kren, with undisguised pride.
The latest genetic augmentations allow our soldiers to adapt to any environment within hours.
Vrax was about to respond when the communications panel chimed.
Incoming priority transmission from the Arctic deployment,
announced the communications officer.
Put it through,
Vrax ordered. The central screen flickered, revealing the frost-covered face of squadron leader Zek. Wind howled in the background, ice crystals forming on his breathing apparatus as he spoke.
Command, we have a situation,
he reported, his voice barely audible over the howling blizzard.
We've encountered unexpected indigenous resistance.
Vrax frowned.
Define unexpected.
They were waiting for us, sir. Camouflage positions. Advanced cold weather gear. They're using the terrain against us, attacking our patrols, and then disappearing into the whiteout conditions.
Casualties?
12 confirmed, sir. 8 more missing.
Vrax shared a concerned look with Kren. This wasn't in line with the intelligence briefings.
Hold position and minimize exposure,
he ordered.
We'll send reinforcements from the Mountain Division.
Before he could close the channel, another incoming transmission lit up the communications panel.
Desert Squadron reporting contact with hostile forces,
came the strained voice of another commander. The visual showed a landscape of endless sand dunes.
They're using some kind of buried explosive devices along our patrol routes. 3 transport vehicles lost. They're hitting us with long-range precision fire from positions we can't locate.
Vrax felt the first stirrings of real concern. 2 simultaneous resistance efforts in completely different environments?
Maintain defensive posture.
he instructed.
How did they know your patrol routes?
Unknown, sir, but they seem very familiar with desert combat tactics.
Before the transmission ended, 3 more incoming signals demanded attention. Jungle Division, Mountain Squadron, and Coastal Forces all reporting coordinated indigenous resistance.
This doesn't make sense.
Murev said, watching the screens with growing alarm.
How can the same species be effectively fighting in all these different environments? The briefing said they're environment limited.
Kren pulled up the intelligence reports on her personal display.
According to our data, they require specialized equipment to survive outside their normal habitable zones. They shouldn't be able to coordinate resistance across such diverse regions simultaneously.
Another alert chimed, this one marked with the highest priority designation. It was from the urban infiltration team deployed to a location called New York City. The squadron leader's face appeared on screen, blood seeping from a wound on her forehead.
Command, we are facing overwhelming resistance. The locals have blockaded major thoroughfares and are using their knowledge of the vertical environment against us. They appear to know the purpose of our deployment and are specifically targeting our communications and command personnel.
How is that possible?
Vrax demanded.
This operation has been classified at the highest levels.
Sir,
Interrupted the data analysis officer.
I'm detecting a strange pattern in their response. Each regional force appears to be using tactics specifically adapted to their local environment, but there's a coordination suggesting shared intelligence.
Vrax was about to order a strategic withdrawal when the central screen suddenly changed. The Dominion military feed was replaced by the image of a human female, her dark skin contrasting with a white military uniform adorned with insignia of rank.
Attention, invading forces.
She said in perfect Dominion standard language.
This is Admiral Helena Okafor of the United Earth Defense Forces. You have illegally entered Earth territory and engaged in hostile actions against a sovereign planet. Cease all operations immediately and prepare for supervised withdrawal.
Vrax stared in shock.
How are they accessing our secure communications? And how do they know our language?
The human continued, seemingly able to hear him.
We've been monitoring your approach for the last 6 standard months. Your encryption is impressive, but not impenetrable. As for your operation, we've been aware of your intentions since your reconnaissance drones began mapping our planet last year.
Impossible,
Breathed Kren.
Our stealth technology
Is based on phase shift principles that our Antarctic research stations detected quite easily, the human interrupted. We've had ample time to prepare for your arrival, and contrary to your intelligence, humans have been adapting to and surviving in every environment this planet offers for thousands of years.
As if to emphasize her point, the screen split to show multiple feeds from around the planet. Humans operating in full desert combat gear, moving with practiced efficiency across dunes. Arctic warfare specialists emerging from snow caves to ambush Dominion patrols. Jungle fighters using the dense canopy to conceal their movements. Mountain troops rappelling down sheer cliff faces to flank Dominion positions.
You seem to have misunderstood something fundamental about us.
Admiral Okafor continued.
We didn't evolve to survive in specific environments. We evolved to adapt to any environment. Where we couldn't adapt biologically, we developed technology and techniques. Every harsh environment on this planet has human communities that have lived there for countless generations.
Vrax felt his confidence evaporating. This was supposed to be a simple training exercise against primitive locals. Furthermore, the human continued, while we may have political divisions, the moment an external threat presents itself, those divisions become irrelevant. The soldiers currently engaging your forces represent every nation on Earth, sharing generations of combat experience in their specific terrains.
Command Overlord.
Kren said quietly.
The casualty reports are accelerating. We've lost contact with the Rainforest Division entirely.
The human admiral seemed to sense their growing concern.
You selected Earth as a training ground because of our environmental diversity, but you failed to understand that this diversity is our strength, not our weakness. Each environment has shaped different human cultures, different survival strategies, different ways of fighting.
She leaned closer to the camera.
Your soldiers may have genetic adaptations for different environments, but our soldiers have something more valuable: generations of accumulated knowledge about how to fight in these environments. Your troops are experiencing everything for the first time. Ours have been preparing for this their entire lives.
As if to punctuate her statement, alerts began flooding in from all deployed squadrons, ambushes in the mountains, precision strikes against command posts, sabotage of supply lines. The losses were mounting at an alarming rate.
This is their home.
Morev whispered, comprehension dawning on his young face.
They know every hill, every cave, every favorable position.
Exactly.
Said Admiral Okafor, still somehow able to hear their internal conversations.
And we've been fighting each other across these terrains for centuries. You thought that was a weakness, evidence of our primitive nature. In reality, it means that every environment on this planet contains battle-hardened veterans intimately familiar with combat in that specific setting.
Vrax's mind raced, trying to salvage the deteriorating situation. We still maintain orbital superiority, he pointed out. We can initiate bombardment protocols. I wouldn't recommend that, the human replied calmly. The moment your vessels entered our solar system, we activated our deep space defense network. Check your long-range sensors. Kren quickly pulled up the sensor feeds, her 4 eyes widening in alarm.
Command Overlord. Multiple weapons platforms have emerged from concealed positions on the larger moons of the outer planets. They're all targeted at our fleet.
You hid weapons platforms on your moons.
Vrax couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice.
Of course we did.
Admiral Okafor replied with what appeared to be a facial expression of amusement.
We've been fighting each other for millennia. Did you really think we wouldn't prepare for threats from beyond our world? Every science fiction story our species has produced for the last century has imagined this exact scenario. We've been mentally preparing for alien invasions since before we reached our own moon.
She gestured to someone off-screen, and a new set of data began streaming to the Dominion flagship. It contained comprehensive details of Dominion troop positions, casualty figures more accurate than Vrax's own reports, and a tactical analysis of the fleet's vulnerabilities. This can still end without further bloodshed, the human said. We're transmitting coordinates for an acceptable withdrawal position. Pull your forces back, and we can discuss terms for prisoner exchange and your eventual departure from our system. Vrax felt the weight of command pressing down on him. What had begun as a simple training exercise had turned into a potential military disaster. The choice was clear, if humiliating.
Begin withdrawal procedures.
He ordered.
All squadrons to fall back to designated extraction points.
A wise decision,
said Admiral Okafor.
We'll cease offensive operations to allow your troops to retreat, but be aware that any deviation from the withdrawal plan will be met with immediate force.
As the transmission ended, Vrax turned to face his officers.
How did our intelligence fail so catastrophically?
He demanded. Kren was reviewing the data files, confusion evident in her posture.
Sir, I believe we fundamentally misunderstood their species. We classified them as environment limited because individually they are. But collectively...
She paused, searching for the right words.
Collectively, they've conquered every environment their world has to offer.
And they've been fighting each other for their entire history, added Withdrawal. Of course they're good at warfare. It's in their cultural DNA. Vrax looked back at the tactical display, watching as the scattered remains of his invasion force struggled to reach extraction points.
We chose this planet because of its environmental diversity,
he said quietly.
We never considered that this diversity would produce a species uniquely adapted to warfare in any environment.
What will you tell the High Command?
Kren asked. Vrax considered the question carefully. His career was likely over, but there were lessons here that the Dominion needed to learn.
The truth,
he finally said,
that we gravely underestimated this species, that their apparent weakness, their planetary divisions, and limited individual environmental tolerance conceals their true strength. collective adaptation, and combat experience in every conceivable environment.
He turned away from the display, his decision made.
And I will recommend that planet Earth be reclassified from potential training ground to avoid at all costs.
As the Dominion fleet limped away from the blue planet, Vrax found himself wondering what might have happened if they had approached humans as potential allies rather than training targets. A species that could adapt to fight effectively in any environment would make a formidable addition to the Dominion's forces. But that was a consideration for another time. For now, they had a humiliating defeat to report and wounded soldiers to tend to, and a valuable lesson to remember. Never underestimate a species that has conquered every hostile environment their world could throw at them. Because a species like that doesn't just survive, it thrives on challenges. And apparently, it had been waiting for a challenge like the Dominion for a very long time. 6 months later, as Vrax faced the High Command's disciplinary board, the final communication from Earth arrived. It contained no message, just a simple data package. Comprehensive technical specifications for the Dominion fleet's propulsion systems, weapons capabilities, and defensive vulnerabilities, much of which should have been impossible for the humans to obtain during their brief encounter. Attached was a personal note from Admiral Okafor.
Next time, just ask nicely if you want to visit. We're actually quite hospitable when we're not being invaded. P.S. You might want to upgrade your cybersecurity. Your ship's systems were embarrassingly easy to access.
Vrax realized then that they hadn't just chosen the wrong planet for a training exercise. They had announced their existence to perhaps the most dangerous species in the galaxy, one that adapted not just to environments, but to opponents as well. And for the first time in his military career, Vrax felt something he had never experienced before. Fear of an enemy he had greatly underestimated. The humans weren't just waiting for them to return. They were preparing.